Sometimes as a creator, you get the urge to go back to something you made a long time ago and take another crack at it. To rebuild an old creation with the skills and knowledge you have now and make it into something better than it ever was before. Remakes have been a thing as long as modern media has, and video games have always been partial to them. Nintendo themselves have remastered and reimagined classic titles since as far back as the early 1990s. And Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has taken part itself, bringing back every fighter in series history, including some we hadn't seen for a while, and then remaking almost every stage in series history as well. But speaking as someone with a creative background, sometimes you don't just want to redo your older stuff, sometimes you feel like revisiting ideas you wanted to do before but couldn't, and make them happen for real. This is another thing that happens in Smash all the time, with all kinds of ideas or concepts getting left on the cutting room floor only to show up for real in a later entry. For example, did you know that Final Smashes were originally thought up for the very first game in the series, and they just weren't able to make it happen until Brawl? Or the Ditto Summon in Ultimate was originally planned for Melee, but they weren't able to get it working without causing problems. And the fighters themselves are no exception. For example, there are 4 particular characters who were actually planned for Smash 64, but took until the sequel to get in for real. There are also a few we know of who were considered for Brawl, but didn't make the cut because Sakurai and the team didn't have a concept for them they felt was up to standard. But when Smash 4 rolled around, there they were. We've even seen characters who were already in get their movesets retooled, sometimes to account for new source material, sometimes because something particularly iconic had been missing. Smash has always gone back to the drawing board and given old ideas another look, and Ultimate especially has taken this and run with it. Not only did they bring back every prior fighter and as many old stages as they could, they even finally gave a chance to a couple characters who'd missed their chance prior and brought a long-running fan request out of the doldrums of irrelevance. Even our first newcomer for Fighters Pass 2 is specifically from a franchise that had been too new when the base roster was locked in. While Sakurai has always made sure to give both old and new characters a fair shake, right now it seems he and his team are paying special attention to all things gone but not forgotten. And that brings us to our challenger, someone who is not only one of the few big, long-running fan requests yet to join the fight, but also someone who has had brushes with Smash before but didn't quite make the cut, and someone who I myself previously took a look at much earlier in this series. But now I want to take what I've learned since to make him even better, especially since circumstances now may finally allow this decade-old wish to be granted. Geno! Geno, or the being we know as Geno, hails from a then unprecedented, now iconic Mario spin-off title. Despite his outward appearance, his true form is that of a star, specifically an inhabitant of the Star Road that oversees the world Mario and his friends call home. As basically the in-universe equivalent of divine beings, the role of the stars was to watch over the people, hear their deepest wishes and desires, and grant those they believed were worthy or made with good intent. But one day, everything changed when a colossal sword descended from above and pierced through the heavens, destroying Star Road in its descent to the mortal plane. More than just a blade, it was both a harbinger of untold evil and a gateway to another dimension where that evil laid in wait, allowing an army of living weapons calling themselves the Smithy Gang to pour through and invade the Mushroom Kingdom and all surrounding lands with their sights on conquering the world. With a threat too great for Mario alone to handle, and Star Road in ruins and unable to answer the people's wishes for salvation, who could save them now? And so, in hopes of defying this grim fate, one star chose to fall to the lands below and join the fight personally. Choosing a child's toy as his earthly vessel, he infused its make-believe weaponry with his own celestial magic to create a body able to do battle with the Smithy Gang's forces. Though he struck out on his own at first, Mario soon caught up, and after lending a hand to strike down one of the enemy's commanders, the heroes agreed to join forces. A lot more involved than your typical Mario plot, eh? And that's a big reason why Geno has remained such a fan favorite to this day, despite being a one-off character from a SNES-era spin-off. Super Mario RPG brought so much more to the series than we'd ever seen prior. So many new characters and locations were introduced or formally fleshed out for the first time, and despite being developed outside Nintendo, they fit right into the franchise. It's a testament to how well Squaresoft, now Square-Enix, stuck the landing on what at the time was such an experimental game. Geno himself is not only an original character who feels like he was always part of this world, he also brought with him elaborate lore and world building to this setting. From depicting many classic enemies as sentient beings, to Bowser having more nuance to him than your typical video game bad guy, to the implication that people in Mario's world more or less worship the stars. and much of the lore established here has remained in some way, shape, or form to this day. With all of that in mind, it's no wonder that this game, and Geno with it, is so fondly remembered. Doesn't hurt that it's aged very gracefully for being nearly 25 years old. And that has, naturally, kept him in the conversation for Smash for a while now. Geno's support base actually dates back to Brawl, with a significant following even despite knowing full well what an underdog he was. While talk had quieted down somewhat by the time Smash 4 rolled around, his fans were still waiting, hoping for some sign of life. And then, after over a decade of silence, they got that sign. A Mii Gunner costume gave Geno his first appearance, albeit by proxy, since a cameo in 2003's Mario & Luigi's Superstar Saga. And then came the bombshell from Sakurai himself that he'd actually had his eye on the character since Brawl. While Geno was never going to be Square-Enix's first character in Smash, let's be honest, Final Fantasy was going to have first dibs. This costume was a huge step forward and gave his fans something to be excited about for the first time in a long while. With Ultimate continuing to revisit older scrapped ideas, the fact that Geno was considered for a previous game in some way, shape, or form means he is 100% for sure on Sakurai's radar. With characters from both Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest already present, there is much less competition now within Square Enix than there ever was prior, and the aforementioned Mii costume is still suspiciously absent despite nearly every other from Smash 4 having returned by now. And as Min Min just recently proved, showing up as a spirit does not preclude a character from becoming fully playable later on. Through some strange twist of fate, not only are Geno's chances for Smash the best now that they've ever been, he might just have some of the greatest odds of anyone right now. While it's far from a done deal, as we've seen, Smash has a way of subverting our expectations. This is one wish that may not even need a miracle to become reality now. And if that wish did come to pass, what might Geno be like for real in Smash? This will be a little different than usual since this itself is a remake of one of my prior episodes. I want to take what I've learned in the 3.5 years since to build something more thoughtfully designed and authentic to Smash's style. Geno's basic appearance hasn't been messed with since 1996. While it's a very strong design, 3D technology has come a long way since. Because of that, we can do more than just transfer him over one-to-one, we can also update him. Not like a full reboot or anything, more something that feels like a natural progression of his original look. Something that feels as if he's always been here and his design has slowly evolved over time, sort of like the touch-up Banjo and Kazooie got. The Smashify project did a really good job with their take on Geno, and I think it's a good point of reference for how we could actually end up. We could even take it further with little details like scuff marks and other signs of wear and tear on his doll body, since it was played with a lot before he borrowed it, or a faint glow in certain spots to hint at his true form inhabiting it. Geno's overall animations should befit his unusual nature and what we see of his personality in Super Mario RPG. Focused and duty-bound, he's on a mission to fend off the Smithy Gang and restore Star Road, and he intends to fulfill that. While a more serious character by nature, he's also very knowledgeable and willing to share what he knows to help Mario and his friends understand just how much is at stake and what they can do to help. Righteous yet disciplined, Geno's movements and attack animations should feel practiced, precise, and a little weird considering he's running around in the body of a sized-up toy. The strangeness of what is essentially divinity in the form of a child's plaything should be on full display here, but in a way that still keeps him well out of the uncanny valley, since he is still one of the good guys. His supernatural side could even show up in ways like magic or stardust effects when he jumps and attacks. Maybe he could even levitate during his run animation like our current wielder of star power? I can actually see Geno's alternate colors being handled two different ways. One option is to pull what a few other RPG characters have done and base several on other party members or even prominent NPCs or villains. The other direction I could see them taking? Having his 7 alternate palettes be based on the 7 pieces of Star Road you collect over the course of the game. It'd be a really cool reference, though it'd also mean fewer overt shoutouts. Both options have their pros and cons. Now let's go over Geno's fighting style, stats, and other attributes. My original take on his concept made Geno a more typical projectile zoner, but not only have we had a lot of DLC zoners so far, it actually wouldn't quite fit his more offensively geared stat line in his game. So instead, I've retooled him to focus more on mid-range combat, geared toward proactive use of his moves at arm's length to trade blows with his opponents and ideally punch through their own options or outrange them. Fighting more aggressively to overpower his enemies rather than sitting back and putting up walls fits Geno's source material a lot better, don't you think? Also has the side effect of making his playstyle very different from Mii Gunner's, which would help ensure they both feel distinct. Moving to Geno's stats, he stands at more or less the same size as Mario. Below average and compactly built overall, it can make him a bit tricky to hit in some situations. Which is good since he's, very light, due to the frailness of his doll body. Weighing in the same as Meta Knight and only slightly more than Kirby and Pikachu, he'd be vulnerable to dying very early if he gets hit by the wrong thing at the wrong time. Taking control in neutral situations and dictating the flow of combat would be very important here, because if he starts getting pressured back, he won't last very long. The good news is he has enough mobility to make that game plan work. Geno has the highest base speed of any party member in Super Mario RPG, so it only makes sense that he'd be decently fast in Smash as well. Above average movement when walking or in the air leads into dash and run speed in the top third of the roster. I could even see him having notably high air control like Rosalina, able to stop and reverse direction easily. One thing he's not so fast at, though, is falling. Being notably floaty means he'll need to handle neutral differently than other footsies-based characters who fall faster, since he hangs in the air for so much longer. Gives him more ability to throw out rising aerials and auto-cancel them without lag upon landing, but since his jumps have more hang time, there's more of a pause during them before he can fast fall and throw out landing aerials. Slower fall speed also helps him recover better since he has more time to drift closer to the stage, but it also means he takes longer to land when hit straight up, making him prone to getting juggled. Though when he gets going, Geno would be a force to be reckoned with, boasting attacks that hit hard and kill early when utilized right. In his game, he has high damage output with both physical attacks and magic alike, and in Smash he'd be the same way. Multiple strong KO options would fit his role as a bringer of divine judgment. He's not here to nickel and dime his way to a win, he'd rather blow them away on the spot. But with that kind of power comes a lot of windup, giving most of his moves pretty substantial end lag as a whole, especially if he used certain properties of theirs. More on that in a moment. Needing to commit to his attacks would restrict Geno's combo options and leave him vulnerable to opponents who can punish him when he whiffs them. Not to say all of his attacks would be so high risk, high reward. He'd have a few faster moves to round out his kit. They'd just be more for utility purposes. Now, let's see just what would make Geno such an interesting fighter. Not only does he have a unique moveset to offer, it functions quite differently from any we've seen so far. So, you know how in every Mario RPG spin-off in existence, every attack has a thing where you can make it stronger by pressing a button at the right time or doing some other prompt? These action commands were introduced in Super Mario RPG and have become a staple ever since. So of course a character from it would incorporate them into his moveset. Most of Geno's attacks would have optional extra inputs you can press as the attack is happening. Time it right, and the attacks get stronger or gain other effects. Though not only would the timing vary based on what type of weapon he's using for that particular attack, activating an action command would also increase the move's end lag. Part of Geno's learning curve would come not only from getting the timing for these commands down, but also understanding when and when not to go for them. So let's talk about his actual moveset. Geno's jab combo would start with a right punch, then a left punch, then he sticks his right hand out, opens up his fingers, and fires a rapid chain of point-blank explosions from his fingertips. Yeah, did I mention all of his weapons in his game are sized up, magically enhanced toy munitions? This move's a solid damage dealer, and one of his only moves to not have an action command, for simplicity's sake. Geno's forward tilt pulls from his default attack if he has no weapon equipped, detaching his fist and firing at a short distance forward like a rocket. A good spacing tool for beating out grounded options that can also score knockouts at high percents. It'd even be coded as a disjoint and not a projectile, making it immune to reflectors. It'd also be fairly high commitment though, so beware opponents jumping in over it. For any rocket-based attacks, pressing A right as Geno's fist reaches its max range would have the fist open up and release a small magic explosion for extra damage. Then his up tilt has him reach straight up and fire a blast of star magic from the doll's open palm. A fairly quick anti-air that can also combo at low percents, but only hits directly above him. This one's not actually based on one of his canon weapons. It just felt like a natural extension of his abilities and helps round out his moveset. For any palm-based attacks, holding A as you perform the move would have Geno create a second blast immediately after the first one, dealing 2 hits total with more active frames but also more end lag afterward. For his down tilt, Geno points toward the ground while in a crouching position, opens his fingertip, and fires a single iron pellet from it. For any finger shot based attacks, other than his jab, pressing A as the pellets reach their max range would have them explode for a second hit. Sounds similar to the rocket command, but the extra hitboxes on these are bigger yet weaker. A low poke comparable to a lot of sword down tilts, it works best when you sneak it under opposing attacks. Geno's dash attack is another palm-based move, this time aiming the magic blast straight in front of him as he slows down. Stronger than many dash attacks, it'd be a reliable kill move if your opponent's at 140% or so, but it'd also be slower than average, not hitting until around frame 11 or 12. Geno's smash attacks all share one specific weapon. They use the Star Gun, his ultimate weapon from Mario RPG. His forward smash has him morph both arms at once and fire star-shaped projectiles straight ahead. A strong attack with the range of a full platform length, hitting its action command by pressing A again right before Geno fires would even add a second volley after the first, though it'd come with the downside of having such significant startup that it's basically reserved for reads or landing traps. Geno's up smash has him aim skyward instead, firing the stars upward at a slight diagonal angle of, let's say about 75 degrees. Hitting the action command causes the second volley to come out a little lower than the first for even greater reach. A strong option for catching aerial opponents, though again, its startup limits it to when you're confident it'll hit. Rounding out his smash attacks, Geno's down smash has him face the screen and fire left and right simultaneously. With really good coverage, it'd be a go-to tech chase option if you're in position, and, time it right with its significant startup. It'd also have less range on each individual side than his forward smash does, and deal the worst knockback of his smash attacks. Now on to Geno's aerials, a focal point of his moveset. His neutral air is just a simple mid-air spin that covers him for a few frames. Not that strong, but that's because it's more of a backup option if you don't have the space to use anything else. It's decent out of shield at least. It also does not have an action command. And back to the interesting stuff. Geno's forward air is another rocket punch to space with, rocket command and all. It's a really nice footsies tool with some power on it, but again, enough end lag to put you at risk if you miss. It's a little faster to come out than his forward tilt, but with a little less reach. Also, if you land during an aerial extended by an action command, you'd have more landing lag than usual. Best kept in mind. Geno's back air interprets his second best weapon and gives it some magical flair, having him look behind him, extend his elbow, and fire a point-blank explosion from it. Sharing its command with the palm-based moves, it'd be a reliable kill move and a good source of pressure if used while landing. Then his up air has Geno swing one arm overhead and fire a volley of 3 pellets from his fingertips in the process. A very useful tool for juggling and pressuring platforms, especially if you proc the action command to make the shots explode, but this move is also a big enough commitment that you should probably make sure you hit, or else your opponent will be able to go around you. Finally, Geno's down air puts his double punch weapon to use, having him flip over in midair and fire both fists straight down. He'd even take his pose from Mario RPG during it. A disjointed hit with a strong spike on the magic blast if you hit the action command. It's also a move with significant startup and end lag, so don't fish for it. Geno's grabs are pretty typical. Reaches out and tries to grapple someone, decent but not amazing frame data, etc. For his pummel, I gave him a backhand slap. Maybe he learned it from Peach? His forward throw just flings his opponent forward for solid damage and positioning, and his back throw does the same but with a sidearm motion instead. Both do without action commands for simplicity's sake. But Geno's up throw lobs his victim upward and fires a rocket fist straight up at them, dealing the highest damage of his throws at, let's say, about 10.5% without the action command and 12% with. It'd also be a kill throw at fairly late percents if you haven't closed out their stock before then. And his down throw has him slam the enemy to the ground with one hand, point his other elbow at them, and let loose an explosive blast right in their face. Fairly strong itself if you remember to hold A for its command. It even combo into his up tilt or neutral air for a little while at low percents. Finally, I have a few ideas for his taunts. I could see one where he assumes his victory pose from Mario RPG, one where he holds one arm out and morphs it between various armaments as if making sure it's working properly, and one where his star form temporarily leaves the doll body and floats above it for a brief moment before going back in. But what self-respecting RPG character doesn't have some special techniques to break out when the time is right? Geno's B-button moves in Smash could all come straight from the special moves he learns in his game. We begin at neutral with... well, you probably saw this one coming. Geno Beam is his first special attack in Super Mario RPG and the one he starts out with, firing a laser beam at one enemy for moderate damage. If you hold any particular button down until exactly 3 stars have appeared, it deals even more damage. On use, Geno hunkers down, morphs one arm into a Magitech-looking laser rifle, and begins charging. Merely tapping B has him fire a weak beam that only goes a platform length, but holding it causes 1, then 2, then 3 stars to appear above his head just like in the game. Let go and 2 stars are there for a moderately strong beam that reaches further than the 1-star version. Hold until right when the third star appears for a hard-hitting laser that covers about 3/4 of your average stage. Hold too long though, and Geno's arm shorts out and you don't get any attack at all. Each level of charge would get its own visuals so opponents can tell which level he's at with their peripheral vision without needing to look at the stars. And each level of beam would also have its own visuals, becoming brighter and fancier looking the stronger it gets. And it actually charges pretty fast, I think around 20 frames per star. Geno Beam varies in use from a landing trap, call out against something laggy, or even long-range pressure to turn the tables on full-screen zoners trying to camp you, as the beam itself has a trample effect at higher levels that lets it overpower weaker projectiles. It's not much of a zoning tool itself due to its short range and minimum charge and the commitment required for its full power, but it still suits the greater focus on mid-range combat on this version of Geno's concept if you use it wisely. Emphasis on wisely, since even the weakest version still takes about half a second to come out, and you can't cancel out of the charge. For our second special here, we'll borrow from Geno's third special. Okay, it's confusing, but trust me on this one. Especially since Geno World's reputation precedes it. A spinning magic disc that deals just okay damage to one enemy, unless you time its action command just right and make it hit hard enough to functionally inflict instant death on any enemy not immune to it. So how do we keep that balanced in Smash? On use, Geno pivots in place and sidearms the disc forward. Unlike in Super Mario RPG, this version only goes about a platform length before slowing to a stop and then disappearing. But like in Mario RPG, pressing B again at any point once the disc has begun to slow down makes it explode on the spot for a small yet very powerful sweet spot that lasts a single frame. We're talking like around 25% damage and kills at about 100 to 110. As it doesn't travel far enough to really zone with and has too much windup to just throw out without making yourself vulnerable, Geno World works best when your opponent's means of avoiding it are already limited. Trap someone's landing, force attack and read their getup option, intercept someone being a little too careless off stage, or use it as a nasty punish on someone whiffing a particularly laggy attack. And if you go for the action command, you'd best make sure your timing is on point because the move's end lag goes up significantly afterward. Though I could see the non-command version still having use, so there's that. Now let's double back for Geno's up special and repurpose his second special technique to use for recovering. In its original form, Geno Boost is actually a support move that buffs an ally's attack power, and also their defense if you hit its action command. We're going to take some creative liberties here that'll, hopefully, still fit Geno's abilities as a whole. For our version, Geno pauses a brief moment, then boosts upward a short distance at high speed, a picture about the length of Mario's super jump punch. But there's a catch. Pressing B a second time right as Geno reaches the end of his ascent has him activate a second boost that lets him travel even further. Each boost deals a single hit for moderate damage. No multi-hit stuff here, and the hit on the first boost doesn't link into the second, making it more for protection than anything. The default trajectory for the boost is up and slightly forward, though you are able to influence the angle on each boost somewhat so it's not so rigid. The second boost even has a notably big detection range for grabbing the ledge. As a recovery move, Geno Boost gets the job done with above average distance if you hit the action command, though it's pretty subpar if you don't, meaning proper timing is crucial here. Fortunately, the command on this particular move can have a longer activation window than any other, since hitting it can be a matter of life or death. It can also technically work as an anti-air or out-of-shield punish, though he has better options for that. Oh, and I could see the visuals on this move taking the form of red flares of magic that resemble the arrows in the original version. If you're familiar with Geno's abilities, you know what's coming next. His fourth special attack slots right in as his down special. Dealing moderately high damage to all enemies, Geno Blast is useful if you want to wipe out a whole crowd of bad guys right this instant and don't mind the resource cost. Our Smash counterpart can take the same AoE concept and put a unique spin on it. Hold B to charge as Geno drops to one knee and focuses, summoning orbs of light around him. The longer you hold, the more appear. Let go of the button, and Geno stands, raises his hands up, and casts a beam of light high above him. Press B at any point as the beam is rising, and it explodes on the spot into a shower of multicolored rays of light that rain down around Geno on all sides. The longer you wait before activating the light, the further the rays will fall, and the longer you charge beforehand, the more hits you'll get from them. But if you wait too long and the light rises too far up, the magic holding it together falls apart and dissipates uselessly. And the longer you charge, the faster it rises, giving you less and less time to perform the action command. Geno Blast is a powerful coverage move for pressuring ledges or platforms and harassing opponents with poor airspeed trying to land or recover. Use it well, and you have the means to turn the tides or extend an advantage even further. Use it poorly, and you get nothing other than ending up a sitting duck. Worth mentioning that the rays of light do pass through platforms, but not solid stage surfaces, and they don't actually fall any further than whatever elevation Geno was at when he released them. But wait, we have one more move to cover, and one more special attack left untapped. And what better to serve as Geno's final smash than his ultimate technique? Dealing immense damage to all enemies on screen, Geno Flash is the pinnacle of offensive magic. Granted overwhelming power from a smash ball, Geno morphs his entire body into a giant cannon, aims skyward, and launches his true star form into the air above. With his untethered strength on full display, he unleashes a radiant light that rapidly expands, pulling in anyone nearby and searing them for constant damage as long as it lasts. Then a final flash sends anyone in range flying, and he returns to the doll and continues the fight anew. All of this is what Geno could bring to Smash. A celestial star with a divine mission borrowing a humble vessel to join the fight and save his world from ruin. By combining his magical prowess with the weaponry of the toy he inhabits, he offers a presence in battle so distinct that it's helped him remain iconic to this very day. Could the stars have finally aligned for his return? Only time will tell. Packing some serious E-rated heat, Geno's strength in mid-range combat is nearly unparalleled, able to overwhelm and or trade favorably with opposing attacks in neutral and advantage states alike. Strong mobility overall, and notable control over that mobility, allows him to weave around and place his attacks exactly when and where they work best. And when applied with a sound mind and precise timing, the action commands on his moves give him even greater reward when he lands his hits, not to mention gaining some real scary early knockouts from certain specials. With that said, he's very light and floaty, a rough combination when he's the one in a bad situation, since he can't take too many hits. Several of his go-to attacks in neutral have notable cooldown, and when combined with his floatiness, it creates gaps in his spacing and pressure that make him particularly vulnerable to getting punished if he screws up his spacing and his attacks miss. And the additional inputs and precision required to hit his action commands consistently means his players would have to focus on them and learn opponents' habits at the same time. Not to mention playing him in a laggy connection could be painful. Well, that turned out pretty different from my original take on his moveset despite pulling from so many of the same attacks. Hopefully this take on Geno is more appealing and truer to who he is than the previous version, and shows just why so many fans, myself included, have him among our most wanted newcomers. There's a lot about this concept I'm still not 100% confident with, to be honest. Scattering different action commands across his moveset could prove too much of a mess and require too much memorization to know which moves use which commands, but I thought he gained a lot from how much more interesting it made his regular attacks. I'm also not entirely sold on this shade of gold for his signature color. I could see some kind of red or blue or turquoise as well, especially since Min Min got a shade of yellow for hers. And yes, I know they're called timed hits in the original game, but in every appearance since they've been called action commands, and I wanted to go with what they're known more by nowadays. Thanks for this video goes to these people here. Surprised? Special thanks in particular to my patrons for their continued support despite the madness this year has been. And how about you? Is there anything you'd like to see Smash try and revamp in a future game? Or a scrapped idea you'd want to see them make happen for real? Let's see what you think. So, until next time, here's wishing for the best.